Tony, thanks for joining us. Tony, you've had an illustrious career there in broadcasting. What kicked it off for you?
Just over 30 years ago, I joined 6PR after being down at 6WB in Katanning. I was called up and they said, look, we've got an on-air gig for you, but it's not coming up for 3 months. Hey, could you do us a favour, hang around so no one else gets you. Just go into the newsroom, read a couple of bulletins. We know you're not a journalist. And I have been in news ever since, over 30 years. When I joined 6PR, about 18 months after that, I found out my estranged father had moved to Israel, so I went over to visit him in 1981. I've lived in Israel a few times. I've done 3 tours as a Middle East correspondent for 6PR, 1ZB, New Zealand, and the Fairfax and Macquarie networks. But it's also part of my home too. Half my family's Jewish. Many of my friends are Palestinian or Arab or Farsi from Iran. So I guess the Middle East is my second home.
How do you read the political environment there in the Middle East, and has social media played a big influence in the way that the messages have got out?
Social media didn't cause any revolutions. It wasn't even the critical part of it. It has been the critical part of getting information about these conflicts from Afghanistan all the way over to Morocco, out to the Western world, because mainstream media tends to not be able to absorb such huge volumes of information. Suddenly we're seeing people who we normally associate with Arab or Persian clothes and headgear holding up Facebook signs, and we suddenly realise that these people that we've thought are different to us and so different are exactly like us, and we can actually talk to them in real time. We hear their stories about how they live.
Tony, let's get back to some issues that are closer to home. You've been quite an activist with mental health. What has inspired you to do that?
About the age of 14, when my mother was wanting to move from being a general nurse to a psych nurse, I helped her study for that. Got absolutely wrapped in it. Studied psych at uni before I dropped out, but then went on into media. And I've never really given up on my love of knowledge about how the brain works and how our behaviour is affected. And then after some childhood events and various traumas, I found 11 years ago, I hit the wall with post-traumatic stress, some horror that I'd seen and experienced. And after decades, it sort of boiled over. And that really made me a much better advocate than I would have been without getting crook myself.
Why do you think that the governments now have seen mental health as being such an important issue?
Because slowly but surely, evidence is mounting that we have a major problem that is addressable and that doesn't need huge amounts of money to fix some immediate problem.
Where do you see mental health going? Is it heading in the right direction?
Most definitely.
Yep.
And I think as we find more and more that everyone does have mental health, and it's not just 1 in 4 affected by mental illness, all of us on a bad day are going to do something which we wouldn't do if we were balanced or in our right mind.
Tony, you're a much loved broadcaster on 6PR, on the overnight program in particular. What is it about that program that gets you quite excited? Because I can see you're quite passionate when you are talking to the listeners.
Being able to talk to really amazing people as a job is one of the greatest privileges you can have. And if you take the time to listen to them, rather than talk to them, as we do in media mostly during the day, midnight to dawn is one of those rare places where you can be heard no matter what your story is. It doesn't have to move the world. And just hearing those humble stories, I think, gives us a great deal more context for some of the more highfalutin things that we discuss in media.
Tony, an amazing career, and it's taken you all over the world. What is it about Perth that you love?
Living here. I've got the privilege to be here, that we've got sunshine and freedom, and if I don't like the premier of the day, I can say so.